With the swelling focus on mental health and emotional well-being, self-care is likely talked about more now than ever before. Self-care is not a luxury, it is not indulgent, it does not have to be expensive, and it's not optional. Self-care is essential. Today we're going to talk about self-care. Think about how this might look or feel different based on your profession, and consider the importance of boundaries, individual self-care, and team-based self-care as well. Hello, and welcome to the Communicative Leader, hosted by me, Dr. Leah OH. My friends call me Dr. O. I'm a professor of communication and a leadership communication expert. On the Communicative Leader, we're working to make your work life what you want it to be. We're diving into a two-part series on self-care. Today we're going to consider some foundational aspects of wellness at work. We're going to talk about emotional labor, protecting ourselves from burnout, and the importance of boundaries. We're also going to look at individual self-care and what we can do in our teams. The information that we're going to look at today comes from a book I co-authored with the very, very talented Dr. Rebecca Imes and Dr. Jen Hester. We are so proud of this book. It's called Communication and Care Coordination in the Palliative Care Team, a handbook for building and maintaining optimal teams. So what is self-care? Self-care is an essential component of personal and emotional well-being, right? It didn't say optional, folks. It said essential. Self-care encompasses routine opportunities and integrated moments that are designed for balance, to nourish you, and to renew you. Another word I want to point out there, routine. If we think of some professions, think medicine, and more specifically oncology, palliative care, hospice care. Having self-care as a primary recipe is essential for career success. More specifically, if you're looking at hospice and palliative medicine subspecialty, it identifies self-care as integral to provider well-being, satisfaction, and career longevity. So, of course, we're going to look at examples of self-care and think about what that might look like for you, your life, and your work. But I think it's also important we look at what self-care is not. And these are misconceptions that have lingered for far too long. Self-care is not a new-agey fad, right? This is not something that is shiny and new now and is going to disappear. It is not indulgent. It is not a luxury. It does not have to be expensive. It does not have to be time intensive. And again, it is not optional. Self-care can be integrated into any schedule and any budget. Acts of self-care, they can help you to recharge and maintain some balance between your work role and those obligations and your personal role, right? As a partner, as a spouse, as a friend, as a neighbor, as a community member, as a coach. Self-care is just as important for your physical health as it is for your mental well-being. Research continues to show us, my friends, that those who enact self-care practices, they tend to enjoy a higher quality of life, and they tend to be more resilient and have overall higher wellness than those who do not. So I don't know about you, but all of these things sound pretty amazing to me. So before we dive more deeply into self-care, and again, we're going to look at different aspects of self-care. And an aspect I really like, how engaging in self-care can help create a buffer against burnout. But before we dive into that, I want us to talk about emotional labor. When we think about emotional labor, we're thinking about jobs and roles that require us to enact emotions and show authentic emotional reactions as part of the position. People-focused roles, right? So if you are in hospitality, if you are in emergency management, counselor, medicine, teachers, flight attendants, customer service, right? Most of the jobs from time to time call on us to be human, right? To emote. But some professions require it more often than others. palliative and hospice care to help those at end of life, those with chronic illnesses, to be the first line of bereavement when a loved one passes on, or to be a counselor or social worker helping those through crises. Think about the amount of emotional labor that is part and parcel with doing that work. In these situations, employees have to manage and regulate their own emotions in expected ways. So let's say you're an EMT, you arrive at the scene, and even if what you see strikes you at a visceral level, right? I mean, you just feel this in your gut. You feel this in your heart of hearts. You still need to perform your role. You need to enact the skills and knowledge and behaviors that you're expected to. Think about palliative care workers who are expected to demonstrate authentic care and concern when engaging with patients and families. And they're carrying out role responsibilities, and they might even be experiencing personal grief, maybe when they lose a special patient. This is really challenging in situations when patients or clients or customers look to you to be a person before your role, right? Whether it's a medical provider, whether it is EMT, whether it is a counselor. Yet you're expected to put on a brave and professional front. We're asking a lot of these folks, right? We are asking a lot of them. And when we think about emotional labor, we typically do so in two different ways. We're going to think about job-focused emotional labor, and we're going to think about employee-focused emotional labor. When we think of job-focused emotional labor, we are thinking about the frequency, the intensity, and the expectations associated with performing your emotions on the job. So let's think about clinical care, or let's think about counseling, for example. This might mean approaching every patient, every client interaction as if it were the first appointment of the day, where employees enter each encounter with their undivided attention and with all the energy. Think about this. This is a really tall order considering the length of provider shifts, frequency of appointments, and the intensity of topics tackled during those interactions. Job-focused emotional labor, we're looking at interpersonal work demands. And we're thinking about the duration and frequency of interactions with our patients, our clients, our customers, their families. We're thinking about the amount of emotional control that goes in. Where, again, as an employee, we are expected to emote in a very predictable way, right? So again, treating each patient encounter the same degree of attention, concern, and sincerity, even if we're feeling spent, even if we are feeling exhausted, even if we're feeling really emotionally out of whack, right? Then I also want us to think about employee-focused emotional labor. So our job-focused emotional labor, we're thinking about that occupational expectations, right? We're thinking about what happens with that job itself. But the employee-focused emotional labor, that is specific to you, right? What it feels like and looks like for you is likely to be different for one of your colleagues, and then you both are going to differ from another colleague. This aspect of emotional labor looks at how we as individuals process and make sense of managing our emotions to fulfill our professional role, right? The guiding question then becomes, how do I, as a professional, right? Professional what? Professional professor or a counselor or customer service representative. How do I regulate and modify my emotions as I work to fulfill, right, patient or client or customer or other role-related needs? Again, for all of us, this is going to look a little different. Of course, this is going to differ across professions as well. But again, each employee is going to handle and respond to situations differently, right? What I need in order to regulate my emotions as a professor is likely going to be different than what one of my colleagues needs. Also, the way we react and respond to work is going to vary greatly too. Something that I find really, really stressful, another colleague might not bat an eye at, and vice versa. When we think about emotional labor, I want us to dive a little bit more deeply into the academic literature. Yeah. I know. My academic roots, my nerd roots are showing here. But I want us to think about a way in which we tend to manage our emotions at work. And I want us to think about surface acting and deep acting. So let's start with surface acting. And I know it sounds less scary, it sounds less damaging, less onerous than deep acting. But surface acting, my friends, it can lead to some pretty damaging negative outcomes. Surface acting happens when we modify our outward expressions and behaviors to conceal those authentic feelings. This can be as minor as putting on a smile to conceal a bad mood, but over time, acting can lead to some serious physical and psychological concerns. And again, don't get me wrong, we all do this once in a while, right? I've got a headache, I didn't sleep great, I'm annoyed about something. Well, I'm not going to bring that into the classroom with me. I'm going to smile, I'm going to be engaged, I'm going to interact with my students in that moment, even when I'm not feeling my best or as chipper as I'm leading them to believe. So again, we all have these days where we fake it until we make it here and there. Surface acting, though, becomes a big issue when this becomes our go-to. When we are constantly smiling through loss or complaints or challenges, and we're not really processing those emotions, just concealing them. What else do I want you to know about surface acting? Oh, my friends, surface acting, it has been linked to 3 dimensions of burnout: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and lower accomplishments. We're going to dive into more proactive and protective measures you can take to protect yourself from burnout and exhaustion. But I want to point out that this research indicates that work teams can serve as a protective barrier against surface acting. So while professional practice might require situations where you hide authentic feelings, right? You might hear something that really is upsetting. You might have an encounter that was really challenging. But here's the thing. Our work groups, these teams, are a place where we should be able to share these feelings. Since team members spend so much time with one another, they're typically good observers of possible signs of burnout. Sharing feelings and experiences within your team allows for another type of processing that's really helpful: humor, right? All jobs, even the super challenging ones, they have funny moments and occurrences, right? And taking a minute to look at these things, to laugh, to smile together, not only does that help to enhance our cohesion as a team, but it also helps to protect us from burnout. Again, important thing here is using the right lens when appropriate to find humor or lightness. So now that we know what surface acting is, presenting one thing but feeling another, and again, we all do this from time to time at work and at home. Yes, to my 3-year-old, I would love nothing more than to hear the ABC song for the 7th time right now. Right? But again, when this becomes especially damaging is when we are spending much of our time arranging our face and our outward appearance in a smiling, audience-centered, welcoming way. But inside, we're feeling anything but serene or calm or content. Deep acting, on the other hand, is a much more emotionally complex thing that we're going to consider. Unlike surface acting, where employees occasionally fake emotions to meet role demands, I think customer service. No, you might not want to smile all day, especially when you have an incredibly trying encounter with a client. But generally speaking, responding the way you want to respond in that moment might not exactly align with training best practices. Deep acting, it describes these internal processes that we experience as we work through our emotions and we make sense of our feelings and the actions related to our work. This can help to reduce the discomfort associated with having to remain cheerful or brave in a trying situation, because when we're engaging in deep acting, we are going to set aside time to return to these feelings, to address these feelings, right? We're not just stuffing them deep inside and hoping that we never see them again. We recognize, oh gosh, that really hurt, or that really bothered me, or this is really upsetting. Maybe I can look at it at my break, or maybe that's something I think about when I go for a walk. So another example, clinicians in hospice and palliative care, you might not be able to cry on the unit after losing a really special patient. But if you're engaging in deep acting, you're likely going to set aside that time, maybe on a break or at shift's end, to lean into those feelings. But even when we're engaging in deep acting and we're processing those challenging emotions that pop up into work, we're not necessarily immune to burnout. What else? Burnout can be really tricky to see while it's happening. When we think about burnout, it's been described as feelings of helplessness over your work environment and your ability to make a difference. Burnout also tends to occur over a longer period of time, not necessarily one isolated event or one particularly trying period or project or case. Because burnout is connected with environmental issues, so maybe it's increased workload, maybe it's deteriorating peer relationships, maybe that relationship with your leader just continues to be really trying. But because these are environmental, again, we're seeing this emerge slowly over time, which is why it can be really tricky to name. Burnout is linked to traditional stressors as well, heavy workloads, limited or inadequate personnel, maybe you don't have enough materials or financial resources, and again, poor or challenging relationships at work. What else? Many times those who experience burnout, they end up having to transfer to a different unit or a team or even to another organization. Why? Because oftentimes the root of this discomfort, it's not related to the occupation. But what we see, it's usually connected to that specific unit, team, or organization. So we've talked about emotional labor. We've talked about surface and deep acting. We've thought about burnout. Super peppy episode today, huh, my friends? Well, all kidding aside, now I want us to move into more active side, the stuff that you can do. I'm going to give you some autonomy here. Let's talk about self-care activities. I'm going to talk to you about 10 different types of self-care activities. These came from a medical student who conducted some research, but my friends, you don't need to be in healthcare or any specific profession for these to ring true. And actually, after I found these as part of writing the palliative care book I mentioned, these are things that I actually have printed out that I look at routinely to think, okay, how am I doing in this area? Right? And especially at certain times when I'm feeling really stressed out, it's a great reminder. So first one, nourishment, right? Are you eating healthfully? Are you staying hydrated? If your body isn't working well, how can you expect to work well? How can you expect to meet and accomplish your goals? Hygiene, maintaining physical health, appearance, adequate sleep. This can include some pampering, baths, long showers, manicures, massages, things that help you to feel good and secure and grounded in your body. Intellectual and creative health. It can mean following current events. It can mean enjoying books and podcasts and these creative activities, knitting, being in a choir, playing instruments, engaging in photography, drawing. Physical activity, regular exercise. Folks, this doesn't need to be intense. I am not advocating that you need to go do a HIIT workout or, join a CrossFit gym. If that's your jam, great, dive in. Think about taking breaks away from your desk or away from your unit. I work on a campus, and this is a really great way to get some sunshine and fresh air between classes and meetings. It can be going to a yoga class or Pilates, just thinking about ways to use our bodies for more than the work that we are compensated for. You might also think about spiritual care. So certainly when we think about this, if you practice a religion, that would fall into this category, right? Along with prayer, but you can think about meditation, you can think about journaling, reflection, you can think about therapy. In some research I did with Nathan Swords with palliative care workers, for many, this was a mantra before work. One example was someone who said they would mention to themselves, I serve body, mind, and spirit, as they walked into their work each day. Others would use a pin or a necklace, another accessory, as a reminder to stay present. One palliative care clinician we talked to, she had a pin on her lab coat and she touched it regularly throughout the day in order to stay in the present and attend fully to the patient. Right? So this might look different for you based on your role. And maybe if you're in customer service, it is a necklace that you touch when you need a calming moment. Right? Things like this that allow us to take a minute to engage in some breathing and to engage in some reflection. The next category, balance and relaxation. Designated downtime, boundaries, taking time off. Also in here, breathing exercises. I love a good breathing exercise. Right now, I'm practicing triangle breathing with one of my kiddos every night before bed. Guess what? I find myself using it during the day when I need a break or after a challenging interaction. Time for loved ones. Dedicated time with romantic partners, family, and friends, right? These tend to be huge sources of allowing us to recharge, allowing us to feel balanced, allowing us to feel loved. Another one that I really enjoy, big picture goals. Focusing on your 5 and 10-year plan can be really, really helpful, especially when you're new in a career or organization or industry. When I was a new assistant professor, focusing on the big picture was really, really helpful as I worked to earn tenure. 9th category, pleasure and outside activities. Right? So this can be something like the occasional dinner out. It can be time outdoors. It can be cooking, right? Whatever it is that allows you to feel recharged. The last one, hobbies, right? Maybe it's writing. Maybe it's reading for pleasure, arts and crafts, recreational sports. So now that we know different aspects and these different clusters of self-care and have discussed some specific activities, now I want us to bask in the benefits of self-care. There are so many positive outcomes, my friends. In addition to being linked to increases in your quality of life at work, engaging in self-care practices can also result in these following benefits. So, of course, work-life balance, right? Well, many professionals find some sort of meaning and fulfillment in their work. It does not mean that it should be all-consuming. So integrating self-care allows you to enjoy a more balanced life where you find enjoyment in work and in non-work related activities. Stress management, right? This one's really important for me. I'm sure this is ringing true with many of you. Self-care is an effective means of addressing and alleviating stress. So in addition to exercise, meditation, journaling, and reflection are commonly cited sources of self-care linked to stress abatement. What else? I really like this one too. Increases in feelings of personal worth. Well, professionals, right? Think counseling, social work, healthcare, typically identify as caregivers in and out of the clinical environment. They definitely should practice turning those self-nurturing skills inward as well. This idea is reminiscent of the airline instructions to put on your mask before assisting others with theirs. In order to help others, you have to be healthy enough to be helpful. Right? It's important to remember neglecting self-care is not noble, and it is likely to result in you feeling overwhelmed, stressed, and distracted in all aspects of your life, including when you're at work. Another thing that I really like as a positive outcome of self-care, enhanced physical health. Without your physical health, you can't care for your patients or your students or your clients or your customers, your family, or yourself. Maintaining physical health, engaging in regular physical activity, eating well, staying hydrated, getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep. It is important to make time for the routine health checkups in addition to physical, mental, and emotional maintenance or concerns. But we see when we're engaging in self-care, we tend to be in better physical health than those seasons of our life when we're either not engaging in it or people who just choose to not engage in self-care. Another thing I want us to think about is boundary setting. So occasionally we cancel plans. We might miss a lunch break, and we might have to cancel a dinner plan or cancel something else because we have so much work. And this is not necessarily cause for concern if this is done rarely, right? But these actions have a much larger ramifications if we do this frequently, right? Most of us know deep down in our heart of hearts and on the surface, we know what a good self-care regimen for ourselves would be. We also know the importance of it, but a lot of times we fail to follow through. We know that there is a link between commitment and consistency. So if you set a goal, if you tell your family, hey, this is when I'm going to work out every day. If you make a note and you put it on your mirror, you're more likely to follow through. What I want us to think about are these unintended consequences of skipping lunch and staying late. So while it might feel like the only way to stay afloat is to skip breaks or to cancel plans to catch up, these actions come with some consequences, and usually ones that we're too busy to consider in the moment. Because when we are in this position, we often feel like we're doing that furious doggy paddle to stay afloat. But I want you to think about some of the costs associated with it. So if you are listening and you're thinking, oh shoot, that's me. I'm always skipping lunch or trying to eat something, I'm trying to shove something into my mouth over my desk, or I'm staying late. I want you to think about some of these possible consequences. One, you're not likely to change the organization. If your team is still able to meet requirements, senior leadership might not be able to see the true extent in which more resources are needed. You're also giving your consent. You are tacitly okay with this level of work and working conditions by consistently working through breaks or staying late or coming in early. You also could damage relationships. Certainly, our loved ones understand when we have to cancel occasionally, especially if it means we're taking time to recharge our batteries and engaging in self-care. But if we are repeatedly prioritizing work over our loved ones, these relationships are likely to become very strained. We are also depriving ourselves of some physical and emotional well-being. It is incredibly challenging to care for others if you're not properly caring or addressing your own needs, right? Whether they're physical, emotional, or relational. Finally, you're too tired to provide exemplary work. If we have sustained periods of stress, maybe we're understaffed, we're overworked, or we're picking up extra shifts, it can leave us unable to be the employee that we strive to be. Right? So we're going to end with self-care in a team now, because we've talked about individual self-care practices. Now, I have two questions for us. Right? How do professionals balance their individual needs within a team context? And two, what can teams do to integrate self-care and team care into daily roles and team processes? The first question, we kind of already chatted about some of that in terms of what can we do for self-care to enhance our resiliency, to decrease stress. We talked about the importance of deep acting and small things, right? Whether it is pinning, adding a pin to our coat or shirt to, kind of check in, a necklace, whether it's breathing activities, right? But some things that I want you to consider is that there are things that we can do as a group or a unit or as a team, right? So some research showed that developing and maintaining strong peer relationships, and I can't stress this enough, peers really help make the place. They provide buffering from stress. They can help us to process different situations. They can help us to think about different ideas and new ways of doing things. I also want you to consider seeking out mentors, someone who is experienced in something that you haven't quite done yet or or have exposure to, someone who kind of knows the way and can show the way. Think about new ways to engage within the organization. And so this might be considering joining an organizational book club. It might be thinking about serving on a different committee. It might be thinking about attending social events so that you are able to expand your network. I want you to consider the importance of reflecting regularly on your performance. This is another way individually and as a team that we can continue to grow, to innovate, to think about new ideas that are going to serve us better than what we already have. And the same token, improving communication skills, right? Shocking, the communicative leader would suggest this. And thinking about management too and leadership. How are we always coming from a place of growth? How are we coming from a place of saying, what can we be doing to making our lives easier, to enhancing what we do and how we do it? And again, thinking about mindfulness at work. So these suggestions, they largely align with the primary dimensions of self-care, right? The physical, the emotional, spiritual, financial, social, workplace, and future goal setting. Social integration, for example, when we are working on those team relationships, when we are thinking about improving our communication skills, finding new ways to engage with the organization, all of that is adding up to enhancing our social support. We have more around us that we can go to, that we can lean on. Rather than looking at development of peer relationships, these are not frivolous. So my managers out there are thinking, they're at the proverbial water cooler again. There is power in connection. There is power in connecting with others who understand the unique highs and lows of a job. And oftentimes this is really priceless and offers so many benefits. So again, some benefits of these strong peer relationships, these strong group and team associations. Someone who can help you process those difficult emotions because they have an intimate understanding of the work. And again, if this is counseling or palliative care, oncology, hospice, they have an intimate understanding of the specific cases on that unit at a given time. This also leads to having trusted confidence in the workplace, which may develop into lasting friendships. And again, bolstering our social support, providing a buffer against burnout. We have access to more work-related advice, right? What the heck do I do here? Or, hey, I'm really struggling here. Just yesterday, I had a colleague send an email to the group saying, I need a video example of this theory. What do you have, right? So things like that where we are able to be better because of those around us. Access to job affirmation for skills and decision making. This is really, really important, especially for those who are new in the team or group or organization or industry. Affirming them. This is part of mentoring, letting them know that you notice them, that they are doing great. And for veterans too, right? It's one thing to always be modeling best practices, but it's really nice to be acknowledged for that contribution. And again, we can reduce all of these. I don't want to make this reductive, but essentially what it does is it provides us a barrier against isolation. So many suggestions, again, for those individual self-care practices within organization align with emotional and professional health and future goal-setting dimensions of self-care. It's not only about nourishing ourselves now, but considering what steps or factors we're going to integrate to continue to grow personally and professionally. When we take time to reflect on our work performance, we can enhance our emotional and professional health. It lets us pinpoint areas for improvement. What additional skills do I need? What training would I like? How do I hone or acquire or consider additional ways of improving myself as I work through this career? This reflection is also really helpful for those. So some of you may engage in this and say, yes, I want to be a team leader. And for others, we might look and through this reflection say, nope, I'm really happy where I am. This is what I want to be doing. And again, practicing mindfulness in the workplace comes with a slew of benefits, job-related outcomes. We're enhancing our self-care, our well-being, and our development to enact empathy. And one thing I want to leave you with, my friends. So again, we have talked about the importance of self-care. We've looked at burnout. We've looked at emotional labor and surface and deep acting. We know it is essential to engage in self-care activities individually and how we can integrate them into the team as well. And now I'm going to leave you with some advice regarding the crap to fun ratio. This comes directly from the textbook that is written again with Dr. Imes and Dr. Hester. And I think this is a really important thing to end on. So I'm going to read you this quote, and then we're going to talk about what this means for you. When I've approached burnout, it's because I have not had enough time for diversions. One of the things I came across when I was in college was the idea of rotating crops. Having things in your life that replenish you in different ways is helpful. I'm comfortable going from one activity to the next and trying to stay engaged in realizing each one of these has different ways of replenishing you and filling your bucket. We have many dimensions to ourselves as human beings, and we have to touch all of those and try to build them into our life experience. Physically, I exercise. Spiritually, we go to church as a family. I do daily practice for myself. Socially, as a physician, I'm in touch with people all the time, and I really enjoy what I do. I also get to teach and sometimes play an administrative role. I tell people, there's crap in our life, and there's fun in our life, and you have to manage the crap to fun ratio in your life. If there's too much crap, you have to go look for the fun, for the part you enjoy. This week, my friends, I want you to think about your own crap to fun ratio. What areas might benefit from a little more attention? Is there too much work and too little fun? When you're feeling extra tired and weary, it's a sign you need to return to your personal crap to fun ratio. Next week on the Communicative Leader, we continue with our focus on self-care. Next week's guest is a licensed professional counselor and also my sister. I'm so excited to welcome Christine O'Million-Sugg to the Communicative Leader. She shares so many incredible tips that we can use in our professional life to help us to navigate work-related stressors. But guess what? These tips can also help us in our personal life as well. All right, my friends, that wraps up our conversation today. Until next time, communicate with intention and lead with purpose. I'm looking forward to chatting with you again soon on the Communicative Leader.